Death wore a charming smile that December afternoon, arriving in a shiny car with music that made the ground tremble. In the bustling streets of a Nigerian town, where dreams bloomed like hibiscus flowers and youth felt as endless as the horizon, 3 polytechnic students were about to learn the devastating price of a single choice. Toba, Amma, and Doja, bright, beautiful, and full of life, stood at the crossroads of fate, unaware that their decision to follow their boyfriends home would lead them down a path darker than the deepest night. Picture them there, standing in their carefully chosen outfits, their laughter echoing across the campus courtyard. Toba, with her neat clothes and carefully tied scarf, carried herself with quiet dignity. Beside her, Amma's bright dress caught the morning sun, while Doja's skirt sparkled like scattered stars. They were the envy of their peers, 3 friends as close as sisters, their futures seemingly as bright as the Nigerian sun above. But fate, that cruel playwright, had written a different script for their story. On what seemed like an ordinary December day, when the harmattan winds whispered through the trees and carried the dust of approaching festivities, these 3 young women would become entangled in a web of darkness that had been carefully spun to catch the unwary. Danny, Doja's boyfriend, appeared that day in his shiny car, music booming like thunder, his friends Raji and Faji by his side. Their smiles were as wide as the river Niger, but behind them lurked shadows deeper than any river's depths. The boys carried themselves with the confidence of hunters who had spotted their prey, though the girls saw only the promise of adventure and romance. "It's just a small party," they said, their voices sweet as honey musking poison. "Nothing serious. Come with us." Those words, simple, tempting, deadly, would echo through the halls of memory long after the events that followed. They would become a cautionary tale whispered from mother to daughter, a story passed between friends like a sacred warning: be careful who you follow home. This is not just a story of 3 students who made a mistake. It is a mirror held up to the countless young women who daily face the same choices, the same pressures, the same seemingly innocent invitations. It is a tale that peels back the glittering surface of youth's adventures to reveal the serpents that sometimes lie beneath. As the 3 girls climbed into Danny's car that fateful day, their laughter rising like birds into the sky, they couldn't hear the warning drums beating in their hearts. They couldn't see the dark clouds gathering on their horizon. They were young. They were beautiful. They were invincible, or so they thought. But in the tapestry of life, sometimes the brightest threads are the first to be cut. And on that December day, as the car pulled away from the campus, carrying its precious cargo toward an unthinkable destiny, the threads of 3 lives were about to be woven into a pattern of tragedy that would serve as a lesson for generations to come. Let this be a warning to all who hear it. Sometimes the most dangerous traps are laid with smiles, and the deadliest poisons come wrapped in the sweetest promises. The morning broke over the town like a cracked egg, spilling golden light across the dusty streets. Inside her modest home, Mama Toba stirred from sleep, her heart as heavy as river stones. Something dark lingered in the corners of her dreams, a shadow she couldn't quite grasp but felt deep in her bones. Rising from her mat, she pressed her palms together, her weathered face creased with worry. The morning air hung thick with premonition, and her mother's instinct, that ancient compass that had guided her through raising Toba, screamed warnings she couldn't ignore. "Toba," her voice rang out, clear and sharp as a bell in the dawn quiet. "Toba, come and pray." The sound echoed through their small home, carrying the weight of maternal concern. She heard the soft padding of her daughter's feet across the floor, and soon Toba knelt beside her, still heavy with sleep but obedient to her mother's call. Together their voices rose in prayer, but Mama Toba's thoughts kept drifting to the darkness that clouded her heart. As the final amen fell from their lips, she turned to her daughter, gripping Toba's hands with an urgency that made the young woman's eyes widen. "Listen to me." Mama Toba's voice was firm, each word carefully measured like precious beads on a string. "Don't follow anybody out today." No matter what, her eyes bore into her daughter's face, searching for understanding. Toba's protest rose quickly like bubbles in hot water. "But Mama, I don't." "Don't argue with me." Mama Toba cut through her words like a sharp knife through cloth. "If they beg you, if they promise you heaven and earth itself, say no." Her voice rose and fell like a drum in the village square, emphasizing each word. "Promise me, Toba. Promise your mother." Toba nodded, her head bobbing like a lizard on sun-baked rocks, but Mama Toba could see her daughter's mind was already drifting away like leaves in the harmattan wind. "I promise, Mama," she said, the words hollow as an empty gourd. After the morning chores, Toba dressed carefully in her neat clothes, adjusting her scarf with precise movements. She moved about the house like a butterfly, light and distracted, while her mother's warning hung in the air like heavy smoke. Mama Toba watched her daughter prepare for school, her heart growing heavier with each passing moment. As Toba stepped out into the bright morning, waving goodbye with a casual flick of her wrist, Mama Toba stood in the doorway. She watched her daughter's figure grow smaller in the distance, her steps quick and light, like a bird hopping toward freedom. The morning sun caught Toba's scarf, making it gleam like a beacon. "Allah, protect my child," Mama Toba whispered into the morning air, her words carried away by the wind that rustled through the trees. She couldn't shake the feeling that this ordinary morning, bright with promise and possibility, was about to become the darkest day of their lives. Under the harsh afternoon sun, Toba stood with her friends in the school courtyard, their shadows pooling beneath their feet like spilled ink. The news of cancelled classes hung in the air, along with the infectious excitement of Amma and Doja, who buzzed with plans like bees drunk on nectar. "A party," Amma announced, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Just a small one, nothing serious." She clapped her hands together, the sound sharp against the quiet courtyard. "Come with us, Toba." Toba felt her mother's warning wrap around her heart like a thorny vine. Her voice, when it came, was soft but firm. "I can't. I need to study. I can't waste my time like this." The words tasted bitter in her mouth, like unripe fruit. But Doja leaned closer, her perfume sweet and heavy in the air. "It's just a small party, Toba," she whispered, her voice as smooth as honey. "No harm will come. We'll just dance, eat, and come back. Don't be so boring." Ah, Toba, Amma chimed in, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Are you now a grandmother? Live a little." The pressure mounted like heat before a storm, and Toba felt her resolve crumbling like dry clay. "Okay," she whispered, the word escaping like a trapped bird. "But only for a little while." As if summoned by her surrender, a shiny car rounded the corner, music thundering from its speakers like approaching thunder. Danny sat behind the wheel, his smile bright and dangerous as a blade in the sun. Beside him, Raji and Faji lounged like well-fed cats, their grins wide and confident. "Let's go, girls," Danny called out, his voice full of promised adventure. Toba hesitated at the car door, her mother's warning echoing in her mind like distant drums. But Amma and Doja were already climbing in, their laughter rising like sparks from a fire, and Toba found herself following, drawn by the gravity of their joy. The car surged forward, music pulsing through their bodies like a second heartbeat. They wound through the streets, the world outside becoming a blur of color and motion. The house party emerged from the afternoon haze like a mirage, all thumping music and swaying bodies, laughter spilling from every window. They danced, their bodies moving like leaves in the wind, and for a while Toba forgot her unease. The music wrapped around them like a spell, and time slipped away like water through cupped hands. But then Danny clapped his hands, gathering their attention like scattered beads. "Friends," he announced, his grin not quite reaching his eyes, "it's time for a special treat." He led them outside, back to the waiting car, now pointed toward a nearby hotel. The hotel room was already prepared, tables laden with steaming food and gleaming bottles that caught the light like captured stars. "Eat, my queens," Danny said with a flourish, pulling out chairs with exaggerated courtesy. None of them saw the shadow that passed across his face, quick as a cloud across the moon, as they settled in for what they thought would be just another meal among friends. In the hotel room, the air grew thick with laughter and the clinking of glasses. Food disappeared from plates like magic, and drinks flowed freely, each sip drawing the girls deeper into a web they couldn't see. The lights seemed to dance and blur, casting strange shadows on the walls. Far away in her market stall, Mama Toba's hands trembled as she dialed Toba's number for the 10th time. The phone rang endlessly into void, each unanswered call making her heart beat faster like a trapped bird against her ribs. "Why won't she pick up?" she muttered, wiping sweat from her forehead with shaking hands. Her spirit was restless, like the wind before a terrible storm. Back at the hotel, Toba's phone buzzed silently on the table, its screen lighting up with her mother's calls, but the music drowned out its desperate plea for attention. The room had begun to spin, slowly at first, then faster, like a whirlpool drawing them down into darkness. Amma slumped first, her head dropping to her chest like a wilted flower. Adoja followed, her eyes rolling back as she slid sideways in her chair. Toba fought against the heaviness seeping into her limbs, her mother's warning echoing distantly in her mind, but the darkness was too strong. It swallowed her whole, like a python consuming its prey. When consciousness returned, it came in painful fragments. The air was different, cold and damp, heavy with the smell of earth and abandonment. Toba's eyes fluttered open to cracked walls and broken windows, moonlight streaming through like silver blades. They were in an uncompleted building, its skeleton exposed to the night sky like bleached bones. Her wrists burned where thick ropes bit into them, and her ankles were bound just as tightly. Beside her, Amma and Adoja lay unconscious, their beautiful clothes now dirty and torn. Fear gripped Toba's heart like an icy hand as footsteps approached, echoing in the empty space. Dani, Raji and Faji emerged from the shadows, but their faces had changed. Gone were the charming smiles and friendly eyes, replaced by cold, emotionless masks. Behind them, an old man stepped forward, his presence filling the room like choking smoke. In his hands, knives of different sizes caught the moonlight, their edges hungry for blood. "Do not shout," Dani warned, his voice low and dangerous as a coiled snake. The old man moved closer, his eyes burning like coals in the darkness. Beside him sat an empty calabash, waiting patiently for its grotesque offering. Terror spread through Toba's body like poison as the true horror of their situation became clear. This was no simple kidnapping, but something far more sinister. "Pick a knife," the old man commanded, his voice deep and strange, like it came from the bottom of a well. He held out the gleaming weapons, their blades reflecting the girls' terrified faces. "Anyone who refuses will be flogged until their skin peels like yam." The room fell silent except for the steady drip of water from the ceiling, each drop marking time like a countdown to horror. In the cold darkness of the abandoned building, terror unfolded like a nightmare coming to life. The old man produced a small black bottle, its contents as dark as his intentions. The air grew thick with the stench of something foul as he poured the liquid into a wooden cup, approaching Adoja first. "Drink," he commanded, his voice devoid of mercy. When she refused, Dani grabbed her head, forcing the poison past her trembling lips. The liquid disappeared down her throat, followed by awful silence. Moments later, Adoja's body stiffened like a board, her eyes wide with final terror, before she slumped lifeless to the ground. The old man moved with practiced efficiency, raising his blade. The sound that followed would haunt Toba's nightmares forever. Blood flowed into the waiting calabash like a crimson river, while strange chants filled the air, mixing with Toba's screams of horror. Amma went next, too weak to fight. Her hands shook as they forced her to drink, tears streaming down her face until the last moment. Like her friend before her, she collapsed and the knife fell again. The calabash grew heavier with its gruesome collection. Then came Toba's turn. They forced the bitter liquid down her throat, but something extraordinary happened. Her body convulsed, rejecting the poison. Again and again they tried, but each time Toba wretched, her body refusing to surrender to death. The old man's face darkened with frustration. "She is strong," he muttered, his brow furrowing like dried earth. "She cannot be killed." His eyes gleamed with cruel calculation. "We will make her useless instead. Let her live as a shell of herself." The beating that followed left Toba broken but alive, a witness to unimaginable horror. Hours later, they dumped her by the roadside opposite the market, her torn clothes stained with blood, her body limp as a discarded doll. The morning market was in full swing when a woman's scream cut through the busy air. "Somebody come and see," she cried, her basket of tomatoes forgotten as they rolled away in the dust. They just dumped her. People rushed to the scene, their voices rising like startled birds. "Who is she? What happened to her?" The crowd grew, drawn by the horror of the scene before them. Then came the sound that split the heavens, Mama Toba's wail of recognition. She pushed through the crowd with the strength of a lioness protecting her cub, falling to her knees beside her daughter's broken form. "Toba, my child," the words tore from her throat like they were made of thorns. Toba's eyes fluttered weakly, recognizing her mother's voice through the haze of pain. "Mama," she whispered, the word barely a breath, before consciousness fled once more. Mama Toba gathered her daughter in her arms, her tears falling like rain on Toba's battered face. The crowd parted like water as she carried her precious burden through the market, her prayers rising urgent and desperate to the morning sky. Behind her, whispers followed like shadows, spreading the tale of the bloody girl and the mother's anguished cry. They say justice comes like lightning, swift, bright, and terrible to behold. For Danny and his friends, it struck just 3 minutes after they dumped Toba's broken body by the roadside. Their car roared down the dusty road, music blasting as they celebrated their dark deed like hyenas after a feast. This December will be the best ever, Danny shouted, gripping the steering wheel with bloodstained hands. Raji lounged in the back seat, grinning as he imagined the riches their ritual would bring. Faji sipped from a bottle, nodding in agreement, their laughter echoing in the early morning air. But fate had other plans. As they rounded a bend at high speed, a massive truck materialized like an avenging angel, its metal bulk filling their entire world. The crash came with the fury of thunder striking earth. Metal screamed against metal, glass shattered like rain, and evil met its reckoning. Raji died instantly, his wicked dreams ending in twisted metal. Danny survived, but at a terrible cost, both legs crushed beyond saving, one eye gone, leaving his face a grotesque mask of his former handsomeness. Faji's agonized screams pierced the air as he stared at the bloody stump where his arm had been, his future of wealth and power now as severed as his limb. Meanwhile, at the prophet's house, Mama Toba knelt beside her daughter, watching as the holy man worked to save what remained of her child. The prophet, his long beard moving softly with each prayer, placed healing herbs on Toba's wounds while invoking divine protection. This is not an ordinary battle, the prophet said, his eyes seeing beyond the physical wounds to the spiritual assault that had been launched against the girl. But with prayer she will live. Toba lay on the mat, her breathing weak but steady. When her eyes finally opened, they held shadows no young woman should know. They killed them, she whispered, her voice barely audible, like wind through dying leaves. Amma and Adoja, they cut off their heads. I should have listened to you, Mama. News of the crash spread through the town like wildfire, mingling with the story of Toba's survival. People spoke in hushed tones of divine justice, of how evil cannot escape its due punishment. When the police dragged the broken bodies of Danny and Faji from the wreckage, few felt pity for their suffering. In their hospital beds, before being thrown into prison, the reality of their choices settled over them like a shroud. Why did we do it? Danny muttered through swollen lips, staring at the ceiling with his remaining eye. We should have stayed poor. Toba's recovery was slow and incomplete. She would never again walk without help, her once strong voice now permanently reduced to a whisper, but she lived carrying her scars as testament to both the darkness that exists in the world and the light that refuses to be extinguished. The prophet told Mama Toba, your daughter will live, but she will carry these scars for the rest of her life. Let her story be a lesson, and indeed, it became one, a tale of evil punished and innocence, though wounded, enduring. In the years that followed, Toba's story wove itself into the fabric of the town like thread through cloth, becoming a tale that mothers whispered to daughters and sisters shared with sisters. The market where she was found became more than a place of trade. It transformed into a silent reminder of how quickly joy can turn to sorrow, how easily trust can become a trap. When young girls walked the streets in their bright dresses and tinkling laughter, older women would catch their eyes and say, remember Toba, just these 2 words carried the weight of 1,000 warnings. They spoke of a time when 3 beautiful students, Toba, Amma, and Adoja, sparkled like stars in the morning sun, before darkness swallowed their light. Parents found new urgency in their warnings, their voices carrying the echoes of Mama Toba's unheeded prediction. Listen, they would say, gripping their children's hands tight. Listen like your life depends on it, because one day it might. The story of the 3 girls who followed their boyfriends to a party became a shield that mothers raised against the dangers lurking in seemingly innocent invitations. Young women in the town began moving differently through the world, their eyes more watchful, their steps more measured. They learned to recognize the difference between adventure and danger, between romance and risk. When strange cars pulled up with smiling boys and promises of fun, girls would remember the shiny vehicle that carried 3 friends to their doom, and they would shake their heads firm in their refusal. The wreckage of Danny's car, left to rust at the accident scene, became a monument to divine justice. People would point to it and speak of how wickedness carries the seeds of its own destruction. They told of how Raji's evil died with him in twisted metal, how Danny lost his legs and eye, and how Faji's severed arm became the price of his cruel choices. But it was Toba herself who became the most powerful testament to both survival and consequence. Though she could no longer walk without support, though her voice remained forever soft as falling rain, she carried herself with a dignity that spoke louder than any shout. Her presence in the town served as a living reminder that some choices leave marks that time cannot erase. The lesson echoed through the years: be careful who you follow home. Trust, once broken, can never be fully mended. A mother's warning born from love and wisdom is worth more than all the glittering promises that darkness can offer. And so the story lives on, passed from mouth to mouth to mouth, heart to heart. It speaks of three girls who once danced into a December evening, of how two never returned, and of how the third survived to remind us all that life's most devastating traps often come disguised as simple choices. It whispers of divine justice that strikes like lightning, of consequences that follow evil like shadows, and of the wisdom that lies in heeding those who love us most. For in the end, the truth remains clear as morning light. Sometimes the most important choices we make are not between good and evil, but between listening and turning away, between standing firm and being led astray. Dear friends, you have just heard the story of the December sacrifice, a tale that unfolds like autumn leaves in the Harmattan wind. It is not just a story to send shivers down your spine or to pass the time on a quiet evening. No, this narrative carries weight heavier than market yams, truth sharper than a butcher's knife. Perhaps as you listened, you saw yourself in Toba's neat clothes and carefully tied scarf. Maybe you recognized your friends in Amma's bright dress or Doja's sparkling skirt. You might have even felt the pull of temptation, sweet as palm wine, that drew these three beautiful students toward their fate. This is why I share their story with you today. In our world of bright screens and instant messages, where invitations flutter through the air like Harmattan dust, the lessons of Toba's tale ring truer than ever. Young people, especially our beautiful daughters pursuing their education, must understand that danger often wears the mask of opportunity. It comes dressed in fine clothes, driving shiny cars, speaking sweet words that melt like sugar on the tongue. But remember how Mama Toba woke that morning, her heart heavy with premonition. Think of how she begged her daughter to stay safe, to resist the call of adventure. In her wisdom, passed down through generations like precious beads on a string, she sensed the shadow lurking behind the day's bright promise. How different things might have been if Toba had listened, if she had recognized the weight of her mother's words. This story is meant for you, yes, you who are watching this now, perhaps in your room or in your school's common room or while riding the bus home. It is meant for your sisters, your friends, your classmates. Share it with them, for knowledge is like a lantern that lights the path for many feet. If this tale has touched your heart, if it has opened your eyes to dangers you might not have seen before, please show your support by liking this video. Your single click helps spread this important message to others who need to hear it. Leave a comment below sharing what you learned from Toba's story. Perhaps your words will be the warning that saves another young life. And if you want to receive more stories that teach, that warn, that might one day save you or someone you love, subscribe to this channel. Ring the notification bell so you never miss these important lessons wrapped in tales that reflect the world we live in. Remember, my dear viewers, that every choice you make is a step on your life's path. Choose carefully who you follow, where you go, what invitations you accept. Let Toba's story be your guide in moments of doubt. Let her pain be your protection. Let her survival be your strength. For those who have stayed with me until the end of this tale, I thank you. May wisdom guard your steps, may understanding light your way, and may you always remember the story of the December sacrifice. Until our next story, stay safe, stay wise, and remember your life is precious. Guard it well.